Alan Brochstein joins me now, CFA extraordinaire from the United States of America. Alan, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here live.
It's great to have you here, yeah. So you're here for the Benzinga conference tomorrow.
I am, in Paradigm yesterday. I know
Paradigm yesterday. So let's talk about that Paradigm Capital Conference, because that was really the first biosynthesis cannabis conference that I've ever heard of. Do you know of any other one?
No, these guys have done a good job of bringing it to the institutional investor awareness. And I've been following biosynthesis. I learned yesterday a lot of people prefer to call it cellular agriculture.
Well, the other guy said metabolic engineering.
Oh yeah, there you go. So I'm not a scientist. I've been following this stuff for about 3 years, and very aware of what might happen and what the risks and opportunities might be. And so I've been watching it play out, and ironically, of all those companies that were there yesterday, what were there, a dozen? Only 2 of them were around 3 years ago, focused on cannabis. And now we've seen, very impressively, some well-funded companies with good connections to Silicon Valley investors, et cetera, so, entering the space. And I thought it was funny, a lot of these are failed biofuels companies, but they're on a different kind of oil now.
Right. Well, case in point, Amyris Inc. Went from $60 back in 2012, I guess it was, to a low of $2 recently, based on the fact that they were trying to engineer biofuels from algae.
Right.
And after $1.5 billion in paid-in capital, they arrived at this new low market cap before they pivoted to, now they're the largest producer of squalane in the world, which is arguably the best ingredient for skincare.
Right.
He
was bragging about that $1.5 billion.
Well, he was, and I thought that was an interesting approach.
Yeah.
To face it right in the open. Exactly.
Ripped our investors off.
But that's exactly the main takeaway for me from that conference was this is not like, oh, growing cannabis is legal now, let's start a grow up. You can't just say, oh, yeah, actually, let's biosynthesize it. We're just going to start a little bioreactor here on the table and figure it out. I mean, you can't do that.
No.
As the one speaker made very abundantly clear, I think it was actually Jonathan Page from Aurora, it's a multidisciplinary scientific approach that actually requires a team for each of the sub-disciplines to bring it all together into a product.
Yep.
And one of the main things that I took away from it was like in the world of cannabinoids, some of them are producing at scale, but none of them are producing at the in-the-money economic
It's still
level.
a dream.
Right.
But just for the audience's benefit, so what they're trying to do, in case people aren't aware, is to take cannabinoids out of the cannabis cultivation and put it into the fermentation process or other types of what do they call it? Biotech processes. Right. And I learned a new one, microalgae. I mean, I'm familiar with that. That's the way a lot of DHA is made, and some others. But yeast has been a common one. E. coli, I know people in your audience pay attention to InMed. There was not a lot of good talk about E. coli, but yeast, a lot of people working on that. I learned yesterday that yes, you can technically make these cannabinoids using yeast or algae or these other processes, but there may be harmful byproducts that are created. So I think the takeaway for people should be, this is something to watch. There's a lot of capital now starting to flow into the space. There's definitely some brilliant people that are focused on it, and the goal is to create a standardized, low-cost source of cannabinoids, and this will obviously impact many LPs if it's successful, because number one, if they're good branding companies, it's going to benefit them because they'll be able to find their cannabinoids to go into their quote-unquote cannabis products at a much cheaper and more reliable much cheaper price and more reliable consistency. At the same time, imagine, a lot of people like to pound their chest and say, oh, we're going to grow a gazillion grams of cannabis. Well, it's not going to be necessary if this works out. So I suggest that investors pay very close attention to these dozen or so companies. There's a few others as well that are working on this, because it really could be a game changer for the industry.
It's interesting, and I just for the sake of discussion, I want to challenge you on the idea that this will be lower cost in the future. I mean, the great presented hope is that we will be able to bioproduce huge vats full of cannabinoids, specific ones, not just the major ones, but the minor ones as well. As the one gentleman said in a very promotional way, I thought, that in one facility they will be able to produce all of the demand for all cannabinoids in the world every year.
Right, I challenged them on that because it's theoretically true, but it's not likely to happen. And,
Right.
and I think the other thing that people need to understand is, so THC and CBD, these are well known, well understood, in use. These other ones are the rarer ones that Kronos Group talks about. Nobody's selling products with this right now, and what I heard from a lot of people in the crowd that know more than I do is that you're not going to be able to just slap these products onto the public without some sort of testing and things like that. So that part of the story is a little shady, but I do think you can look at, and they gave a great example yesterday, vanilla. Natural vanilla is still around, but it's much cheaper to buy the stuff that's made through these biotech processes. And there were some other examples as well. And so I would not be surprised if 5 years, 10 years from now, a lot of the industry products are from this source.
Right. One of the takeaways for me also was that, okay, so you guys are able to engineer these genetically modified organisms to bio-create specific CBDs that are not of the most popular THC and CBDs, but some of the minor cannabinoids. It strikes me that at the same time in the evolution of plant engineering, is it not likely that they will create strains of plants that are capable of concentrating a specific compound from among the cannabinoids as well?
Yep.
And so therefore, just as these processes are evolving forward, so is the actual craft of cultivated cannabis.
Sure, the genetics are improving.
Right,
Yep.
and cannabis has this amazing ability to generate biomass from a relatively small proportion of nutrients, water, soil, and other inputs.
Like hemp, right.
Yeah, so this is the thing. It's like, okay, well, 5 years down the road, let's assume that the biosynthetics are going to be there. Are they really going to be cheaper than the cultivated crops once they've had their full Franken moment?
I think so, because most of the hemp industry you're taking, for at least now, the genetics aren't good enough that you have to take so much mass, and the transportation cost and processing costs and all that. I can't imagine that's a more efficient way than these processes, but we'll see.
Right. So for now, you're very much of the opinion that the cultivation industry is not under any immediate threat.
No.
Right.
No, and a lot of people that say it'll replace, no, because there'll always be a market, always, for, especially for premium flower, but even crappy flower, there'll be a market for it because that's what people like, and that's not likely to change. People still smoke, even though we've seen a big shift in the tobacco market towards other delivery mechanisms that are healthier. So
sure.
I would imagine there will always be a demand for a lot of flower, especially premium flower.
Right. Yeah, for sure. The interesting slide I saw that they put up was that 25% of the market they expected to remain premium dried flower relative to 75%, which would be the part of the pie that all of the extracts have to share.
Right. Well, just remember, these guys are really bullish on their own stuff. So.
Actually, interestingly, I was in the most anecdotally, empirically, what I thought to be the most financially robust operation on the retail side in San Diego, California, a place called Urban Leaf. And I had the chance to speak to the CEO, and he said that they did $48 million of top line in 2018 at this one
single
location.
Store, wow.
Single
Nice.
store. And I said, okay, well, so tell me, what is the breakdown of the segments of product? And he said, well, 50% was premium dried flower.
Yep.
15% was extracted products like edibles and beverages. And then the remainder was more or less made up of hybrids, so like not extracted, but certainly concentrated forms of like shatter, butter, waxes, the vape pens and fillings. So to me, it was like, wow, California, from a consumer perspective, is probably one of the most sophisticated.
And there's still flour, right?
And it's still 50% flour,
Right.
not just still flour.
That's all the markets. I mean, if you look at Washington, Colorado, all that, and the growth seems to come from the newer products. And I think what's going to really change those numbers is as more evidence comes out, hopefully, that the use of cannabis products is pro-health and not adverse. We'll see new consumers come into the market, and they won't be buying premium flour.
Right.
They'll be buying vape pens, they'll be trying edibles, they'll be trying other forms that are, more these beverages that don't really exist yet.
Right.
I think that's where the market's headed.
Cool. All right, Alan, and finally, what's your favorite top cannabis company pick right now in the world?
Right now in the world, wow. So I'm kind of a contrarian. It's been disappointing to see some of these reports, and I don't want to make it sound like I think that they did a good job. Peter Cito's doing a good job, but he failed on guidance, and he should have let the market know, maybe Afria as well, which just reported. They should have kind of let the market know that the expectations that the analysts had were just so far off. And of course, these weren't the first ones, but I think the reaction to CannTrust was a little bit too severe. I've liked their story. I think they're well positioned. Their market cap is low. I think they haven't executed as well as Organigram, but they're trading at a lower valuation right now. So I guess if I had to pick a stock right now, that one's pretty appealing.
Well, very great. Okay, and if viewers want to learn more about 420Invest, where do they go?
3 W's and 420investor.com.
Okay, great. Alan, pleasure as usual. So great to have you here in the flesh.